Hello and welcome to Send Me. My name's Becky Murray and I'm the founder of an organisation called One by One. Our heart in One by One is simple. It's to stop the vulnerable from around the world being exploited. We want to end exploitation by helping them with restorative care, through educational support and through empowering people in sustainable living. And through that, I believe we can end exploitation. But it takes all hands on decks. It takes me in my world and it takes you in your world, all together saying, here I am, send me. Well, I remember a few years ago, I was out in South Africa and I fell off one step. Now, I remember when it happened, I convinced myself I couldn't have possibly broken my foot because it was one step. This was not a whole staircase that I fell down. It was one step. Now, it was excruciating and painful. I remember as soon as it happened, just this intense pain. And I've got, or at least I like to believe that I have a decent pain threshold. But all of a sudden, this pain in my foot was unbelievable. It was unbearable. But I remember thinking at the time, I can't possibly have broken it. I mean, I fell off one step. So, you know, how much damage could you possibly do? And so the trip went on, and it was actually the night before our first Dignity project out in South Africa. And so I don't know if it's my Yorkshire person that makes me a little bit more stubborn maybe, but I don't like to see it as stubbornness. I like to see it as strong-willed. And so I was determined I'm going to go to that Dignity project and I'm going to be a part of that day. No matter what's going on with my foot, I will be there. I am not missing this. I'm not going to the hospital. I will not miss the Dignity projects that we were about to start doing. So indeed, the week went on. We were there for a whole week doing the Dignity Project in many different schools. So helping lots of girls, thousands of girls actually out in South Africa. But then I finally came home and I remember going to the hospital. So by this point, my injury had gone on for a whole week. And I made it to the hospital where they x-rayed my foot and found out that not only had I broken my foot, I'd actually broken it in 3 different places. And I remember being like, oh, but it was only one step. And so at first they initially put me in a cast, but it turned out I'm absolutely appalling on crutches. Who knew that using crutches is like an Olympic sport? I thought, you know, that it looked pretty easy. I've seen people use crutches before, it looks super easy. I give it a go and I am appalling. So I discovered very early on, crutches are not going to work for me. The other alternative was to use a wheelchair. Now, at some points in South Africa, I'd had to use a wheelchair to get around just because it was so hard. I couldn't weight bear at all on my foot. Now I know why, I'd broken it. But out there, they'd put me in a chair to help me maneuver around places. But I didn't really like it. It wasn't what I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to move freely wherever I could. So eventually the hospital fitted me with this certain boot. Now it's a miraculous boot that enabled me to walk. It's fitted with metal plates down the side and it's also got a large metal plate along the bottom, and it helps bring the stability to keep your foot in the right place so that your bones can heal correctly whilst you're still moving. Great invention. The only problem with this boot was it had a 1-inch heel. This meant if on my left shoe I wore a flat shoe, then I was 1 inch out. My left was 1 inch lower. But if on my left I wore a heel, the majority of my heels are 2 inch. So if I wore a heel, I was now 1 inch higher and my feet were constantly out of alignment. But I remember I had to wear this boot for the best part of a year while my foot was fully healing. And throughout that time, I ended up overcompensating with my hips to try and just walk normal. And it caused some major back issues for me. The truth was, I was out of alignment. Now, I hate to break it to you, but we can actually walk that way in our spiritual lives too. Everything's going well in our business workplace, but, well, our family lives are out of sync. Or everything's going well in what we're doing and how we physically are healthy, but internally we're spiritually dry. And we too, if we don't have the right balance, can walk out of sync. Well, I want to focus today on our work-life balance. If you want to be a person who says, here I am, send me, then it's going to demand a part of you giving of yourself and working hard to fulfill the plans and the purposes of God in your life. But if you do that to the extent of your walk with God, we miss the whole thing. We're totally walking out of balance. You see, Jesus turns to his disciples in Mark 6 and verse 31, and he says, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." Even Jesus acknowledged the time for coming aside, coming and spending quality time with Jesus. You see, the truth is, if Jesus is central in our lives, we can never really be off balance. But sometimes, especially when you have a yes cry from your heart, where you want to keep doing as much as you can possibly do for God, we're so focused on what we're doing for him that we can sometimes neglect spending time with him. And when we do that, we fall into incredible pitfalls when we're outrunning what God wants you to do in your life, and we're trying to make things happen in our own way rather than depending on him and the guidance of the Holy Spirit. And so today, I want to focus on having regular patterns of work and regular patterns of rest. And in truth, this all comes back down to the age-old Mary and Martha debate. So let's refresh ourselves. We can find the scripture here in Luke chapter 10, and I'm going to read a few verses from verse 38 down to verse 42. Now it happened as they went, he, this is Jesus, entered a certain village, and a certain woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who also sat at Jesus' feet and heard his word. But Martha was distracted with so much serving, and she approached him and said, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Therefore tell her to help me." And Jesus answered her and said, "Martha, Martha, you are worried and troubled about many things, but one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen that good part which will not be taken away from her." I love the reality of the Bible where you're seeing two sisters squabbling over it because one's working really hard and the other one's just sat there doing nothing. And Martha is just this incredibly real person who goes up to Jesus and says, "Well, tell her." And I think we can all relate to Martha at times in our life. I know through the years I've heard Martha take a real beating over the years because she was too busy serving, too distracted that she neglected Jesus. But the truth was, at least Martha opened up her home. Because of her heart to serve, she invited the master in. Had it not been for her heart to invite him in, he wouldn't have been there at all. And so I've heard Martha take this beating, but actually I can really relate to Martha. You see, she finds purpose in what she is doing, and I can relate to that. I love the work we do with our missions organisation One by One, and I get so much fulfilment out of that. Sometimes I can fall into the trap of finding my purpose in what I am doing for God, rather than the fact I'm a daughter of the King. That's my identity. That's who I am. It's not about what I do. It's who I am. And it's the same in our lives. But if you want to be someone who says, "Here I am, send me," it also means you need to have a servant heart. And Martha has this real servant heart to open up her home to Jesus. Now, this meal was hard work. There would have been at least 14 people there. There's Jesus, there's his 12 disciples, there's Martha and Mary. There's at least 14 people that she's preparing a meal for. I remember a few years ago, we invited guests round to our house. And I came home from work that evening. I'd been in the office all day. I came home and knew that my guests were arriving. I thought I'd got about 2 hours before they were due to come. So me being me, I focused on the house first because God forbid someone should walk in my house and see somewhere that people actually live rather than a show home. And so I came home and I'm rushing around. I've got the Hoover out and I'm vacuuming everywhere and I'm polishing and cleaning, and the place was spotless. I was very happy. And by this point, I'd got about an hour left before my guests were due to come. And so I remember thinking, okay, I've got loads of time. I'm going to cut up the vegetables and then have the chicken marinating so that when the guests arrive, I can sit down and have a drink with them and talk through the day while the chicken continues to marinate, and it'll all be perfectly timed. Well, to my horror, 15 minutes later, my husband Matthew walks through the door with the guests. They were 45 minutes early. Well, I just went into panic mode. Nothing was ready. The dessert hadn't been prepped. The vegetables weren't washed or cut up. Nothing was ready. I was furious. And so I'm rushing around in the kitchen. I barely even said hello to our guests. I'm rushing around and I'm trying to cut everything as quickly as I can, and I'm stressed and I'm annoyed and everything's frustrated. The truth was, I was a horrible host that day. I was shocking. I left Matthew to do all the talking to the guests. The poor guest just sat there feeling incredibly awkward because I was clearly stressed running around in the kitchen. The truth was, they knew they were 45 minutes early, so they weren't expecting anything to be ready yet. They knew they were ahead of time, so they were fine about it. But instead, I was all panicked. I may also add, neither did they go along my work surfaces checking for dust. They didn't do that either. But I was so stressed, I was so annoyed in the moment that I lost the beauty of spending time with some precious friends. You see, I chose to be a Martha in that moment, too busy serving, too busy trying to get everything just so, because I wanted to be a good host, when in reality I ended up being an appalling host. Needless to say, now we do takeaways when we have friends around. But so many times we're focused like this in our lives too, where we're so focused on the work we're doing, we can miss the being with Jesus, taking time to come apart, to rest and spend time with God. Can you relate? I think we've all been there and had times just like that, right? See, Martha was so busy on serving that she took her eyes off. She became distracted in the busyness of the moment. But the truth is, I don't think it's an either or debate with Mary and Martha. I think the truth is we can be both in our life. You see, Martha opened up her home. She loved Jesus enough to open up her home and invite him in. However, from that point, she became so distracted with the busyness that she didn't actually spend time with Jesus, whereas Mary did. Mary sat at the feet of Jesus, listening to his every word, loving on him, spending time with him. And that was so precious and so vital. But I believe if you want to be someone who says, "Here I am, send me," we can be both. You see, it's cultivating an intimate walk with Jesus, even in the midst of a busy, fast-paced life. And I believe we can absolutely do both. I remember when we first started the Dignity Project, it only came about because of a Martha moment. I was out serving in Kenya at the time when all of a sudden a mum first approached me at the school gate telling me about her missing child. 2 days later, a second mum and again came saying, "My child's missing, can you help?" And that's when we found out human trafficking was happening on our doorstep in the village we work in Kenya. It was only through being a Martha out on the mission field that we even discovered there was an issue, there was a need to be met. It was only out there being a Martha that we saw it. However, it was actually in a time of worship. I remember coming home from that trip, and then I went to a conference where I wasn't the speaker, I wasn't doing a role there, I was just attending. And let me pause for a second and say, sometimes when you are running hard after God, you fall into the pitfalls of only going to church when you're the guest speaker, or only going to church when you're serving that particular week. Maybe you're on the worship team, or you're on the sound team, or you're serving in some department. But let me encourage you, don't let that be the time you spend with Christ. We've got to have daily time of spending with Jesus. But then even over and above that, let me encourage you, go to places, be a part of things that are going to fill your soul, are going to nourish you, because when you're giving out, you also need to receive in. And so I remember going to this conference down in London, and it was phenomenal. There were thousands of people there. The worship was just electric. It was an amazing, amazing conference. But it was during this time of worship that all of a sudden it was like a download of just how to treat this, how to make a difference, how to prevent people from being exploited through human trafficking. And it was during the time of worship that it suddenly started to come into my heart about the whole problem of period poverty being combined with human trafficking, that so many girls miss a week of school every single month simply because she doesn't have the practical products that she needs. And it was during this time of worship that it suddenly dawned on me, if I can get to the girls before the traffickers, if I can equip them with the practical solutions of the reusable sanitary towels, if I can do all that and then train them about human trafficking, well, then maybe we can help combat this issue. Maybe we can prevent human trafficking from happening in our village. And it was only through having a time of being a Mary, sitting at the feet of Jesus, not distracted, wasn't even thinking about the missions work, wasn't even thinking about anything like that. I was literally just lost in a time of worship when all of a sudden I felt the whole project be downloaded into my heart. And the truth is, because I was a Martha, I discovered the need. Had I not been a Martha, I would have never even known human trafficking was an issue. But then equally, had I not been a Mary in that situation, just spending time worshipping Jesus, coming away from the busy, fast-pacedness of life just to spend time worshipping God. Had it not been for that, I don't think I would have ever had the blueprint for the Dignity Project, as it were. Now, as a result of that, we've been able to reach thousands of girls with the Dignity Project. But it all came about because of a Mary and Martha moment where the two were combined. And in doing so, we were able to then run out and fulfill what we believed God was asking us to do. You see, the actual pitfall for Martha wasn't in the serving. It was the fact that she kept comparing herself. How many times as Christians do we fall into the comparison trap? You know, I have a life group with some incredible, beautiful women of God where we pray together and we share the word together. And it's been a life source to me for a few years. And these women are just incredible. They are the type of women who cook everything organic, fresh. They, honestly, everything is the most exquisite of ingredients. They make everything from fresh. They never buy pre-made. Everything they buy the ingredients for, it's always organic, it's beautiful. They'll spend hours preparing the most beautiful, healthy meals. Meanwhile, I will rush home from work, go via the supermarket and find the quickest thing that I can just shove into the oven, as it were. And I look at their lives and I think, I really fail in comparison to them. They're so much better than me because they're so beautiful in how they prepare their food, whereas mine's rushed just to get through the meal and just move on to the next project. And I compare myself against them and I fall short. Another one of my friends recently made her own headboard for their bedroom. She stitched it all together. She made it look, you walk in and it's just this masterpiece as you walk into their bedroom. It's this beautiful display. Meanwhile, I can't stitch a button on a shirt. And I look at them and I think, I fail as a wife. I fail as a mum. In comparison to them, I just really fall short. Yet meanwhile, I know because of stories that we've all shared together that they've sometimes thought the same of our lives. They've looked at the things we're doing around the world and they say, well, what am I doing? You know, and the problem is we compare each other. We fall into the comparison trap. Instead, we should be championing one another. We shouldn't be comparing, we should be championing. Sometimes social media doesn't help. We look at social media and we see everybody's highlights. We see the meals that they put on Instagram. Meanwhile, our sandwiches never make it to Instagram. Have you noticed people only ever put the meals that they've spent hours preparing on Instagram? They'll never put their sandwich on Instagram. And sometimes we go through our normal lives looking at people's highlights and we compare their highlights with our normal reality. No wonder we always feel like we fall short. We need to stop comparing one another. Focus on what it is God's asked of you. Run in your lane. As a send me one, what is God asking of you? Stop looking at your sister. Stop looking at your brother. Stop looking at your friends. Focusing on what God's asked you to do, because there's great fulfillment in that. Stop comparing one another and just champion. You know, the interesting thing about Jesus is he doesn't criticize Mary for her service. All Jesus says is stop worrying. So many times we lose time through worrying about things that never even happen. And Jesus comes alongside Mary and says, just stop your worrying. You know, stop your comparing, stop your panicking, stop your stressing over things that haven't even happened yet, and focus instead on Jesus today. What's causing you to worry today? Maybe it's your teenage children. Maybe it's stresses in the workplace. Maybe it's that unexpected bill that you just don't have the finance for. Let me tell you to stop worrying today, to come and sit at the feet of Jesus just like Mary did. See, as we take our eyes off the situation and focus instead on Christ, focus on who he is and what he does in and through our lives, that's when everything again begins to come in balance. Instead of being out of sync in our worlds, we walk in balance when Christ is the centre of who we are and what we do. You see, God's got a plan. He's had a plan right from the start. It started with two people called Adam and Eve, and he's still got a plan today for your life. He's got a plan and a purpose for you. So quit your comparisons, quit your worrying, and sit at the feet of Jesus. And when you do that, all begins to come into balance once again. I want to encourage you today, as you're walking in your God-given passion, to follow him, to be a Martha in terms of your heart for serving, but to be a Mary in terms of your heart of sitting at the feet of Jesus. When he is first and foremost, everything else comes into place anyway. It's not a choice here. It's not either being a Martha or being a Mary, but it's walking out being both. Walking a life that is intimately in love, following your master, but then equally still running in a fast-paced world, fulfilling all the plans and purposes that God has got for your lives. If you, like the prophet Isaiah, want to say, "Here I am, send me," then it's going to require you being both Mary and Martha in and through your lives. But as you do, you'll see him fulfill his call upon you and through you. I'm going to show you a video shortly that talks about the Dignity Project. I've been sharing on the Dignity Project throughout this episode, but it talks about the vision that we had for the Dignity Project, about how we want to reach thousands of girls right around the world, how we had the joy of taking this into Parliament and sharing it with the government too. We've got incredible plans and purposes of God through this initiative that he may move in a practical way to reach countless girls around the world. So please watch this video and be blessed.
In 2015, after several girls were going missing in my village in Kenya, my heart was stirred to see what was happening. After finding out that human trafficking was happening on my doorstep, I was compelled to do something about this. We began to do some research and found out that the girls that were going missing weren't being abducted in the night like I'd imagined, but they were going willingly, having been deceived by traffickers.
After discovering that girls were being tricked into these positions, we decided to do something to prevent this from being able to happen. Introducing the Dignity Project. The Dignity Project is an anti-human trafficking campaign designed to help and empower vulnerable young women and girls. Our work is threefold. First, we provide schoolgirls with reusable sanitary products so that they don't have to miss any school due to their periods. Second, we educate girls on the tactics that human traffickers use to entice their victims and alert them to red flags to look out for. And thirdly, we empower girls to say no to sexual abuse and drive home the fundamental truth that they are precious, dignified, and absolutely not for sale.
If a girl can receive her full education, her chances of being exploited are dramatically reduced. We've been trialling this programme out across Kenya and other parts of Africa for the last 3 years, and so far the results we've had have been astonishing. Feedback from head teachers has revealed that the girls' attendance has increased. This also means they've got a higher chance of going on to higher education and not being trafficked.
Today, we're proud to announce our 2020 vision to reach 20,000 girls with the Dignity Project by the end of 2020.
We are now launching the Dignity Project globally, taking it into South America and Asia too. Join with us to see the 2020 vision fulfilled and see girls rise up with strength and dignity.
It has been a joy to watch the Dignity Project grow and unfold right around the world, across Africa, across South America, across Asia. It's been astounding to watch God open doors and reach thousands of girls. We've now reached over 20,000 girls with this initiative, and to watch it grow has been incredible. Maybe you could help a girl go through the Dignity Project. It costs just £10 to reach one girl. £10 in and of itself is nothing. But 10 times £10 by 20,000 girls, and that's a lot of help that we need to reach thousands more around the world. Well, maybe you can help us. £10 a month or $10 a month would help us reach a girl every single month with the Dignity Project. That means throughout the year you can help prevent 12 girls from being exploited. If you're able to help, then please go to the website. It's onebyone.net, and you can read all about the Dignity Project and the places we've worked and see how you can sign up to also help a girl. Or maybe you've heard all about it and you think, do you know what? I want to come out on a trip. I want to go and see the Dignity Project. Well, we take volunteers with us all around the world, and we get volunteers involved in the training program, involved in the dramas and all the fun stuff that we do on Dignity Days. So again, go to the website, see where we're headed in the next few years, and we would love to have you come and join us on one of our future missions trips. Well, finally, on the website, you can also pick up a copy of Embrace the Journey. This is a book I recently published, and it's got lots of stories all about girls that we've met with the Dignity Project, as well as many other stories about the start of One by One. So please check all that out at the website. Let me encourage you in closing today. You don't have to choose to be an either or. It's not Mary or Martha. But it's cultivating an intimate walk with Christ, even in the middle of a fast-paced world. So I want to encourage you, sit at the feet of Jesus. Take time to spend with him, to gaze upon him, for him to become your all in all. And as you do, he will use you greatly as you, like Martha, begin to serve the world around you. I hope that's blessed you, and I can't wait to be with you again next week. God bless.